So where we last left off, we created controls for our entire character. We have them all nice and organized. I'm actually going to probably change the size of these a little bit. You don't really have to. It's just going to make it a little easier for me to see things. In the end, it all really matters is how you or the person who's going to be interacting with your character is going to be working with it. That looks good. So now that we have all these controls done, it's starting to come together to the point where we can start putting things and associating with one another. So what I have right now is all these different circles, but they're still just circles. They're not associated to anything. They just happen to be circles in the same spots as my joints. What we need to do is, before we do anything, I'm going to select all of them. So I just selected, held shift, selected all of them in my outliner. You can just manually hold shift. I want to freeze their transformations. That's going to be very important because we want things to rotate nicely around their own pivot points. So now that I have that all done, it's time to start associating them with one another. So we're going to do that by initiating parent constraints. What a parent constraint is it's basically similar to a parent system, but it has a lot more control over specific joints or specific objects. Normally you would use them for animation, where if you want to have an object interact with a character and you want to keyframe when it is and isn't being interacted with, you would use a parent constraint there. In this case, we're using it just to define itself as a control. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the feet controls, which are the most complicated ones to use. And the reason I'm doing that is just because they're so complicated, and it's just easier to get them done before everything else. So to do that, I'm going to select my control. Then I'm going to select this IK handle. And that's the main reason why it's difficult, because you always want to select the IK handle for the foot control, because I want it to control this handle, not that joint. So then I'm going to go constrain and then parent. And what happens now is, if I select this control right here and move it, it's going to control that whole leg for me, which is perfect. So that's extremely important to have. And now if I select my foot control, that's all nice. So everything looks good. I'm going to do the same with the other foot control. So select that, constrain, parent. And then we're going to work our way up to the next joint. So from now on, we're going to do the controls to the joints. So this I'm going to select here. I'm going to go constrain, parent. And from now on, I'm just going to use G on my keyboard in order to repeat the last command. So my root control goes to here, just like that. This one goes to this one. Oops, I'm going to turn my model off actually to make it a little easier to select. So this is going to go to here, create that. So if I select this and move this around, it should move the body. Perfect. This will go to this one. This to here. And I'm just going to move down the chain of command just to make sure I know exactly which ones I did and didn't do. But if you're good with it, you should be fine on it on your own. So there's that. So one arm done. Now let's go on to the next arm. That will go there. That will go there. So pretty straightforward and simple. So now that I've got all my controls, if I move my root joint, that's moving there. So it's good in the sense that it's actually moving the joint, but it's bad because this is my root joint. It should be controlling everything else. Same thing if I move this arm around, it shouldn't be moving this like that, or if I rotate it, it shouldn't be rotating like that. It's good because it's actually rotating it, but it's supposed to be controlling the other joints, and since it's controlling that joint, it's not working. So we have another step in the process of pretty much parenting these joints, these controls to the joints. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the arm. And then what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to hold shift, select the next joint. So I'm starting from outwards and moving inwards and pressing P. So that way this one controls this one. And now if I do it to this one, that will control there. So now if I rotate this, you can see it's moving the whole arm, which is exactly what we want. So next step, this is going to here. This one's going to go down to this one. And I'm just working my way down to the root joint, just like this. So that looks good. I'm going to do the exact same process, just like that. This will go to this. This to this. All right, that to that. So now if I select this root joint, you see how all of them are lighting up. So it's very important to just kind of double check to see what controls you have set up, just so you know how everything is going. In the end, if I click on the root joint control, everything should light up on my character. And he should move a little bit more differently than before. So now that that's all set up, everything lights up. If I move it around, the whole character moves. See? And now if I move any of these joints via the rotate tool, they should all rotate properly. Perfect. So, and as you can see, all my joints actually got renamed and parented in their nice system, so it's all neat here. So now if I wanted to, I could just name this controls if I wanted to, or anything like that. We do have one more control we're going to actually have, and that is our main control. So I'm going to create one more circle, and I'm going to scale it up a nice size. Is my character not even? He is not even. Let's see what happened. Let us zero this out a bit. There we go. So this control right here is going to be our main control. What that does is it just controls the whole body a little easier than just doing it to the root joint. So I'm just going to name this one main. And this control is going to control my root joint, just like that. So now if I move this, it will move the whole thing. Perfect. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create what's called pole vectors. So pole vectors are essentially little objects that define the front of certain IK handle joints. They're not always necessary, but they're usually very useful, so you don't run into a situation where if I move this leg up to a certain point, it'll snap backwards. Due to me rigging this pretty well, it's not snapping backwards, and that's why, because we had the joint moved forward when we created that IK handle, but it's always good to have a pole vector just to be safe. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create them now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Create, Nerd Primitives, Circle. I'm going to bring them roughly to where my knees are, so I'm going to actually snap them to my knee. Let me turn this off so it's easier to snap it. Make sure it's going to the right knee. I want to move it forward a little bit, rotate it about 90 degrees. I'm going to scale it down a little bit, and that should be good. What I wanted to do is let me create another one and move this over here. I'm just going to eyeball it from the front view just to be organized with it. That looks good. So now I'm going to select the two of these. I want to freeze their transformations just to be safe. And we're going to name this L underscore pole vector. L underscore pole vector. And this is going to be R underscore pole vector. So I've got these two controls right here. And what you're going to do is you're going to actually have those, select the control, select the IK handle. We're going to go to constrain, and then we're going to go to pole vector through the option box. That looks good. I'm going to hit apply. What should happen is it will move and create this little spot right here. So if I ever move this pull vector around to the other side, my leg breaks and goes to the other side. This is used to actually fix your joints in your leg if they ever break. So I'm going to do the same thing with this one. So constrain pull vector, and that looks pretty good. After that, I'm just going to parent these to my hip controls as I would normally. So let's just go into each leg. That way, if I rotate this, they should move along with it. Perfect. After that, all we really have left to do is skin our character and then see how he works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my skeleton, my geometry, and I'm just going to go to skin, bind skin. And there we go. Now if I rotate any of these joints, he should move, and he looks pretty good. If I move his leg around or anything like that, that looks nice. Everything's moving pretty well. I may want to parent it a little differently with those pull vectors, but for the most part, everything works nicely. So let's see what happens if I unparent those. Let's parent them to the feet and see if that works any better. Let's see. Oops. Oh yeah, that definitely works a lot better until you get to really far back. But that's what they're for. We can adjust them as we need. So I'm going to actually parent them to the feet controls instead. But that's pretty much for the general basics of rigging. In the next video, we're going to go over paint weighting. So